So basic orientation to the Basecamp layout. Basecamp, of course, being a Garmin product that's downloadable from the internet, and once installed on your computer you'll have this kind of screen layout. As you can see, the majority of the screen is dedicated to the mapping area where you can edit, view and create your trip files. To the left you've got a library section, upper left, which we'll deal with in a bit more detail later on. In the library section, essentially you save all your route files, your track files, your waypoints, any other relevant information gets organized and saved there for easy access. Also, the screen windows on the left are adjustable depending on the number of entries or the level of detail that you're showing. Bottom left is essentially the contents of whichever menu or file you've selected in the library. So pretty dynamic and adjusts to whatever it is that you want to look at in more detail. So essentially a look into the relevant file that you've created here, and it could consist of, again, routes, tracks, waypoints, potentially other relevant information. To the top you've got a typical Windows menu layout, and just below that you've got the contents or the selection of your toolbar options. So I'll deal with the toolbars a bit more, and we can have a look at how to set those up to get the best performance in terms of drawing out files, route files, track files, waypoints, etc. In terms of the menu layout, right at the top of the application, there isn't a lot that you can do to change that. I would just recommend that you spend a few minutes expanding each of those items and having a look and familiarizing yourself with the options and the selections within each menu structure. What we're going to do is to rather focus on setting up the toolbar, which is the second line over here, that contains things like the activity profiles, the level of detail, transferring and receiving buttons from external devices, etc., etc. There's the map products. So this line here is the toolbar line, and you're going to predominantly be working with these options here, not too much with the menus up here. So I would recommend that you set up your toolbar in exactly the same way that I'm doing mine. To get to that, you go to View, Toolbars, and then you will find this range of selected features. I recommend that you pause here for a moment and set yours up exactly the same as what I'm showing here, because these are the most prominent options that you are going to be using when you are building basic trip files. Whatever you select in the library top left section is what you'll see on screen. I've clicked on my collection, which is a full view of every single route, track, waypoint that I have created on Basecamp. And here you can see how cluttered the view is. If you go and select any one of the list folders or lists within your collection, then the view, the map view on the right, will change accordingly. So in essence, decluttering what you see. So if I select this list folder, which is called JHB, it's going to predominantly only show me the information that's contained in that list folder and the lists within it. If I select Rural Park, it will only show me that and the corresponding information, which I'll have to zoom into to share with you. So that's the layout. That's how it works. Whatever you select here is what will come up and show on the main map. Before you start creating a trip file, it's important for you to create a suitable place where you can store that information. The rationale here is that you would select My Collection, click on that, go to File, New, then create a list folder, which is the upper or main folder that you're going to save your stuff into for your trip file. And I'm going to aptly name this file structure how to. So I created that. That is the list folder, and it's got a 2-tier structure to it. So within a list folder there are different lists. Typical example you can see here, the list folder is JHB, and I've named the list something else. In this way you can use whatever you want to simplify or to organize your information. You can see that I've got various approaches to the same theme. Whatever works for you. It's just a index where you can keep your information clearly marked and organized. What I do recommend is within a list folder that you create at least 3 main lists or subfolders. One for routes, one for tracks, and one for waypoints. These being the main elements of any trip file that you're going to be creating. I'm going to stay very pragmatic in this tutorial, and there's a lot of theory that drives the use of the 3 different elements in creating a successful trip file. These elements are tracks, routes, and waypoints. So I'm going to just show you on screen quickly what the main differences are between those 3, and after that I'm also going to share with you my practical approach to dealing with each of these. Right, now that you have an idea of how all of that works and what the differences are between routes, tracks, and waypoints, I'll share my rationale with you. In my years of creating routes, which have predominantly been off-road orientated, either for off-road motorbiking or 4x4ing or the like, I have come to realize that the easiest approach is to select the correct activity profile, which I will explain just in a short while. Create your legs of your trip using the route option or the route functionality, editing those once you've created them, and when you're completely happy and ready with them to use them, you convert them to tracks. And the track files are essentially what you are going to export to your devices and share with your mates. So that's the approach that I have taken, and also the approach that I'm going to advocate in this tutorial. Activity profiles assist you in customizing and ultimately optimizing the route file that you have created between 2 points. Not applicable to tracks. So again, just to orientate you, not applicable if you're using tracks or creating tracks, but in a route option, activity profiles play an important role. So let's take an example and assume that we want to travel from Berrydale to Mikey'sfontein, and I'm going to show you the impact of using different activity profiles. So important is to pre-select the activity profile that you have in mind that's most suitable for what you want to be doing during this trip. Select it up front before you start drawing your route files. So in this case, let's go with the almost default setting of driving presumably a sedan vehicle. So we create a route, and it's going to prompt us with a request of where we would like to save that route file. Typically we would want to put it in routes because it is a route. It's going to bring up this window. It'll show you an activity profile, and it'll ask you to drag or enter your start and end points here. So let's say we're going to go from Barrydale to Matjiesfontein. So let's search on Barrydale and let's see. So Barrydale, Western Cape, and we said we want to go to Matjiesfontein. Matjiesfontein or Western Cape. Alright, we then click, and immediately it will create a couple of different views on your screen. The first one is you'll see this pop-up screen that describes the route that has just been created. It'll give you some basic information about it, via points, it'll have a distance, timing information, all sorts of navigational stuff, and there's also a bunch of options that you can go and look at here. For now, let's stay with the properties tab. We can see 2 waypoints have been created, typically the departure and the arrival points, and then on screen in a magenta color we will see the route that's been created based on the input we've given. So let me scroll back using the mouse wheel, and let's get an idea of what this looks like. So imagine this being the most optimized option for you to take between Barrydale and Matjiesfontein in a sedan car. Now let's have a look at what will happen if we're walking the route. And as I change this, keep your eye on the screen, which will now explain to you exactly what the difference is between these different activity profiles. So we can assume that driving in a car from A to B should not be the same route as when you walk it. I imagine walking would have an emphasis on maybe the shortest route, regardless of the condition or quality of the road. So let's see if we select walking, and you can see that it has indeed changed. We can select bicycling, also again a slight change, right? Let's take dirt biking. Okay, again it's changed. So it's optimized it to adjust to the parameters of the different activity definitions. Very important to understand this, and to make sure that you select the correct activity profile. Within an activity profile, you can also go and adjust or modify that, which is a more advanced thing that I'll discuss in a later tutorial. Here you can see some modified activity profiles, but if you're going to be doing one for your adventure biking or your off-roading or your 4x4ing, obviously just click on the off-road activity profile. Let's now create a leg in our trip. This leg specifically goes from Toes River to Matjiesfontein, and I have selected the off-road activity profile because in this case I'm in a 4x4 or even on an adventure motorbike, and I would like to capitalize on all these nice dirt roads going around the back. I'm not really interested in this case in going on the N1. So let's see how that's going to look. Keep in the back of your mind that you're going to be working with a route creation. So you will create the route, then you'll edit the route. You might add in some waypoints along the process of creating this leg for all the important things that you want to include or draw attention to, and when you're done with all of that, you are going to convert to a track which you're then going to share or export to your devices for the actual ride. So let's take a look maybe at putting in some waypoints, right? I like building my legs from fuel stop to fuel stop. So let's put this waypoint into our leg. So just to remind you, we've got the route or the trip name, which in this case is how to. Within that trip, we've got some folders, some list folders here that are routes, tracks, and waypoints. So I'm going to select waypoint, and I'm going to add in this fuel stop as a waypoint. So I hover my mouse over the icon, and after a second or so, it will bring up the name, right click, say new waypoint, and instantly it's been added to the waypoint file or list in your trip information structure here. Now let's scroll back. Mouse wheel, you can scroll in and out. So we scroll back, we've got that. Let's see if we have one in Mikey's Fontaine. There's another one there. So I'm going to again mouse over, comes up as a name. I say new waypoint. Now you can see I've got a start and an end. I can very easily now select the start, sorry, that's the end, start, hold down control, select the end, and say create a route. I can do that. That's one way of doing it. But I know that it'll normally select something that I don't have in mind, because I've got a very specific idea of where I want to go. I might want to go up here, go down here, hang a left here, right here. So I'm not going to use this as an approach. I'm going to delete that route that's been auto-created. But that is one way of creating a route. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw it out. So I click on my routes tool. You'll see that the mouse turns into a little pencil, which means you're now ready to draw. And I don't need this window. I'm not going to use the approach of dragging beginning and end points. I'm going to close this down. So I'm going to scroll in, and you'll notice that if you move your mouse to the edges of your screen, it turns into a little arrow. So if you left click, it gives you the ability to scroll the map in that direction. So I'm going to start here. I zoom in to get the highest level of detail I can. That's important when you build these routes, so that you don't miss out on any of the details, blah blah blah. So I click and I drag, and I can now find my orientation. I know I want to go onto this dirt route here, so I'm going to put down little pegs, and the guidance is put down pegs wherever you believe later on you would want to maybe edit or move a point. So I click there, that's one little peg. I go up, here's the next decision I might want to make, so I click there. Okay, that's beginning to look quite good. Scroll up a bit. I need to make a decision here. Let's go left. Okay, so I'm going to click down there. I'm going to go up here. I'm going to put another click there with the mouse, and then I'm going to scroll a bit across. Yeah, that's okay. Let's come down here. I want to click there. Actually, I'm going to undo that last click. I want to move it slightly, so I undo that, and you'll see if you undo it goes back to the previous one. I'm going to keep them nice and on the junctions so that I can later on modify that. So here's another one where we might want to make some decisions. Another one here. Yeah, why not? Let's go up here. Let's see if we can go up there. Here, and then we stop. And I can't quite see my fuel station that I selected. There we go. We stop here. Okay, so that's the route. I'm happy with it. I don't want to carry on drawing, so I press on escape on the keyboard, and that's the end of the route. Now I go back and I select the little hand so that I can move it around, and there is my route all done and dusted. Now ready for me to go and edit and adjust things. Now I have my route drawn, and it goes exactly where I wanted it to go. from Toes River to Maatjiesfontein. I've put in all the detail I want, and I realized that there is a piece that I actually wanted to include for whatever reason. Presumably in this case, this river crossing is in flood, and I really want to get my 4x4 rig through that river crossing. So I'm really keen to go and cross the Groot Rivier here, which implies that I have to change a piece of my route. This is where the value of the little points come in, the drop points that you've used when you created the route initially. And how to edit it is quite simple. You click on the route, make sure that it's selected. You go to the move point tool, click on that, and as soon as you mouse over your route, you'll see that wherever you created those little pegs, wherever you put down pegs, you'll see black dots appearing. These black dots can be moved to achieve the new change that you have in mind for your route. So I want to literally change this route by coming up here and going around there and coming down there. So I'm going to try this. It's a bit of a trial and error approach. It doesn't always work the first time, but whenever you've done something and you want to undo it, just remember to go edit, undo. So I'm going to select here. Okay, I think I've just unselected the whole process. So let me select that. I've got the tool, the move point tool that's active. I'm going to draw this point and put it up here. That's worked beautifully. There we go. Now it's recalculated. It's the new route the way I wanted it to be, and I can go and double click here and see the new statistics related to that route. And you can do this as many times as you want. Make sure it's selected, make sure the move point toolbar is active, so it's got a little box around it. Mouse over to see all the little junctures that you've created, or pegs, and you can move each one of them to suit your need any way you want. The last step before we regard this leg of the trip as completed and we export it to a track file is to validate the route. There are some mysteries when using this GPS software, and what I found with Basecamp over the years, although it's a very good program and I wouldn't easily swap it for any of the alternatives, is that sometimes, especially when you're not paying attention to the details and not zooming in close enough, the tool for drawing routes tends to double back on itself. Inevitably tends to maybe loop back. Maybe you've not got your mouse or your pencil exactly in the middle of the surface, the road surface that you're intending to travel on, and this creates a looping back or duplication where it then adds false kilometers. What I mean by looping back is something like this section here. You can see that the arrows are actually moving in two directions, right? So to make sure that that is not the case, you simply go to the playback function. You can set it to 1000. If you set it to any lower speed, you would sit here the whole day trying to cover this leg of your route. Set it to 1000 and then click on start and watch. You can zoom out, watch the flow of the route and make sure that there is no double backing in the route that you didn't want to have there in the first place. So we can see the only double backing is this leg here, and that's intentional. We wanted it to be like that, but for the rest of it, it's a one-way route. You're not going to waste any time that you can't potentially see on screen. And at this point, it's a sorted story for this leg. The only last step we're going to do now is we are going to take this, and by the way, you can rename it. You can call it whatever you want. Day 1. Let's do this. Okay, I suggest not leaving it as magenta. Magenta is the default, so I would all my routes that I've verified and vetted, I would turn into a different color. And there you go, a nice little off-road route. The only thing we need to do is convert it to a track. So you do that by selecting create track. You can see the icon is different, and it also looks different on your screen. I would open that up, and you can see in essence now, going back to the definitions of what a route is and what a track is. The track here is a breadcrumb approach. Every single point on the track has a coordinate, and I'll show that to you very quickly. So let's make the tracks green and the routes red, and I'm going to just slim this down for the sake of the display. So I can select any one of these points and it'll bring up a equivalent location on the route. So in this way I can also modify and adjust things, right? By scrolling down, I can cut out pieces, add in pieces. So there we go, that's the track. The last thing I need to do is to make sure that we stay organized. So again, I'm in the route list, and I've got a route and a track, which is not the right thing to have. So I'm going to move this track to the track folder. It copies by default, it doesn't move. So if I go and check there, I can see it there, it's still here as well. So I'm going to delete that copy. So we're now organized and we're ready to export that track for use. So we've got our trip file name, and the file structure accordingly is that there are different lists with the three main elements of this leg of the trip.